Okay, I'm going to go and call the attendance. Miss Darling? Here. Miss Raymond?
Here. Sorry.
Mr. Claffey will be calling in by phone. Miss Brown? Here. Miss Oden?
Here.
I'm here. Miss Johnson?
Present.
Miss Bishop?
Here.
And Miss Giglio?
Here.
And we also have Dr. Andrade and Mr. Posca and Mr. Donovan and our student members, Mr. Farley
Here.
and Mr. Castellano.
Here.
Thanks. Okay.
Can you do the prayer?
Oh, sure.
And then, Ms. Johnson, can you lead us in the pledge? We're calling God for the prayer.
Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty of managing the educational institutions of our beloved city. In our common endeavors, may we find a spirit of unity and understanding which will enable us to face our multiple problems with an objective mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will be for the betterment and greater happiness of all of our fellow citizens. Amen.
Amen. Heather, why don't we have Dante move over and he can sit in Neil's seat, and then we can move the invisible person to his
Is he
seat.
on the phone? Because it sounds to me like he's on the phone.
I can't hear anything.
Neil, are you there?
Nope.
All right, I'll try again.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we can just call him on that phone. Sorry, I will hand the floor over to Dr. Andrade for the recognition presentation. Yeah.
Thank you. This evening, we have a special recognition to Principal Coffey at Fairgrounds, sorry, at Fairgrounds Middle School. So Sharon has been in the district for 45 years. And over the last couple months, myself and the two assistant superintendents have been going around and recognizing all of our teachers and our principals for their years of service. But 45 years is something special. So we wanted to make it a special treat and recognize Sharon for her devotion to all students in the district, her devotion to every educator, secretary, custodian. Her love for the district is unheralded. I've never seen somebody so committed to what she's doing. This year, going into her 45th year, I pushed our building principals on to take on 45-day goals to really stretch their wings around teaching and learning. And Sharon, at first, I have to say, you were a little uncomfortable, but she just kept on rising above. And it's really impressive to see her grow and continue to learn after all these years of service. So it's just, again, we wanted to take a little time tonight.
Hold on, I'm going to put you on speaker.
To recognize your years. And we were afraid we were going to miss some of the schools and where you started out. So if I can embarrass you just a little bit to come on up and talk about your first teaching assignment all the way through where you are today.
Thank you, Dr. Andre. My first teaching assignment was at Elm Street Junior High School. It was a junior high then. I was a math teacher, and I taught grade 8 there for 8 years. Then I became an administrator, but it was part-time, so I moved over to Spring Street, which is where the courthouse stands now, across from St. Pat's Church. And I was there part-time for 3 years. I taught math, but I also did part-time assistant principal. And then we moved to Pennachuck. I was there 6 weeks. And then I went to Nashua High School, which is now Nashua High School South, for 10 years. And then I decided I just wanted a little change of scenery, so I moved over to Fairgrounds Junior High and then as an assistant principal. And I was there for about 15 years before I became principal. So I've been principal there for 8 years. I'm very proud of school. I'm a Nashua native. I attended Fairgrounds, I attended Nashua High School, so it was nice to be in buildings that I had once been a student at. And I'm just very proud to be, part of Nashua. And some people said to me, why don't you move elsewhere? And I said, no, I want to stay here. I'm glad I did.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I don't know if Ms. Coffey remembers, but you were my principal at Nashua South. But I ran for Mr. Church and Mr. Burpee downstairs, so you never saw what kind of trouble I could get into. We are lucky to have you, though. I am looking for, into the consent agenda, looking for a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Can we just acknowledge that we did get Mr. Claffey on the phone?
Yep, Mr. Claffey's here at 6:08.
And he needs to, under RSA 91A2, verify that he is in fact alone in the room.
I asked him to mute, at least. Are you alone in the room, Mr. Claffey?
I am alone in a room, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any qualms with Mr. Claffey calling in? Okay. It is not a medical emergency or anything. It's just accommodating his lovely summer schedule. Okay. So
Thank you.
no objections. Welcome, Mr. Claffey.
Hello?
Hi. So you can just keep it on mute until you have something to say.
Yeah, muted.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll make your consent agenda motion.
Okay. So Ms. Raymond has made a motion to accept the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Gilio. All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, shoot, we have to do all roll call.
Oh, that's right.
So,
Okay.
you got a long job tonight, Ms. Lampier.
There's a lot, too. Whew. Okay, Ms. Darling?
Nay.
Ms. Raymond?
Yay.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Nay.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Nay.
Ms. Bishop, sorry.
Yes.
And Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, the motion passes 6-3.
Okay. This brings us up to our first public comment question period. If somebody could hand me the sign-up sheet.
We don't have a sign-up sheet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I usually come out, but I didn't think about it.
Would anybody like to come speak?
Well, they have to sign up.
There's a second one. Thank you.
Ms. Tyler, you need a pen here, guys. And that's my pen.
Okay, I apologize. Let's take a couple minutes and let people sign up for public comment.
I just want to apologize for the delay because it's the clerk's responsibility to put that out, and I wasn't thinking. I'm sorry about that.
How dare you forget? Would you mind getting that for me, Christina? Thank you. Wait,
The other
Only-
one signed up on second.
oh, for second, okay. I was like, I saw more than one person up there. Okay, so reminder, 3 minutes, I'll put a timer on, there's one person speaking, Maura McIntyre.
Good evening, Maura McIntyre.
I don't think the mic is on.
Should be a green light on.
It was on. Can you hear me now?
You just have to talk really close to it.
Okay, Maura McIntyre, 7 Sacramento Street, Nashua. I teach at Mount Pleasant. I understand that the beginning of this conversation is going to be about the middle school lines. And something that has concerned me is the fact that Dr. Andrade has quoted that the middle school redistricting took the free reduced lunch into consideration when you laid out those 3 schools. My question is, why wasn't that done with the elementary schools? It's not hard to see which schools are adding students and which schools aren't, and most of these same schools, unfortunately, are the ones with the highest enrollment, coupled with the highest ELL and FRL students. It just gives me pause in this day and age to think about that happening. It sounds, it's actually neither fair nor equitable. Some might argue shameful. You took the time to do it with the middle schools. Why is it not being done or given the same amount of time to redistrict the elementary schools? This new proposal looks very much like the 1930s era homeowners loan corporation redlining. Educational policymakers and administration need to strongly consider the historical implications of redlining and past neighborhood inequalities when designing any change for a school district. A study out of Harvard by Lukes and Cleveland in 2021 found that the historical impact still lingers from student achievement scores and funding to ability to obtain employment post-graduation. Based on the overview of the proposed redistricting, I worry about the impact of our lower socioeconomic students having the same educational advantage as some students in other schools. And one last thing I'd like you to consider is the students in transition. Mount Pleasant's proximity to the Front Door Agency and the Bridges program, both agencies that serve families in need of emergency support and shelter, makes an important impact on the accessibility of education for our students. And with 10% of Mount Pleasant's student population being in transition, I would ask that this be a large consideration in your vote on July 24th. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have no other public comments. This brings us up to our superintendent's comments.
Thank you very much. I want to start off just, again, mentioning graduation exercises. We dodged the rain in graduation for the class of 2023, went off without a hitch, or a little bit of a hitch at the beginning with our sound system. But congratulations to all who graduated, nearly 800 graduates in total. We continue to be impressed with the post-secondary choices of our graduates. No doubt you'll remember our student representatives from the board from last year. Both are members of the class of 2023. Armani Rogers of North will be attending Boston College and studying biology, and Samay Sahu of South plans on attending Dartmouth while studying economics. Again, congratulations to each member of the class of 2023. Gatorade 2023 New Hampshire Boys Soccer Player of the Year. Congratulations to Santiago Samarostro, South Class of 2024, who was recently named the 2023 Gatorade New Hampshire Boys Soccer Player of the Year. The Nashua High School South Boys Soccer Team won the 2022 Division I Championship last fall. Santiago, a midfielder, led the Panthers to a 17-3 season, scoring 16 goals and 18 assists. Kindergarten registration. To date, Families have registered about 500 K students. We urge all Nashua families to register their 5-year-olds online by logging into the school district website and clicking the registration link on the homepage. We look forward to welcoming our kindergartners in the fall. I also want to address some of the comments in public comments. I had the wonderful pleasure of meeting with the Mount Pleasant staff. It was about a week and a half ago at this point. Time seems to fly. And we, I think, had a really great conversation on the school. And I said it at that time, and I'll say it again, I think it's the first time publicly, that I agree with a lot of the principals and been standing up at the podium about the educational services that school is delivering for our students. It is truly a wonderful place. There's dedicated professionals, para-educators, kitchen staff, everyone who's involved in the Mount Pleasant community is just top-notch. And I need to say that publicly. When we're having these conversations, I can't argue. Educationally, they're doing a wonderful job. Small class sizes are a blessing, and we're very fortunate to have that not only at Mount Pleasant, but across the district. The professional development that was going on in that building, especially around trauma-informed decision-making, is top-notch. So again, I think that staff over there and the quality of education the students are receiving is remarkable. And so I think I need to say that publicly. And I also did at that meeting with the faculty say, there's also the other side of the coin that we have to consider, and that's the future financial investment, and that's a larger kind of conversation. And that, so, and that's what we've been kind of debating. So I want the public to know, especially from the superintendent's point of view, where I should be the top educational leader. The work that you're doing on a day in and day out basis for our students is recognized. It is appreciated. So thank you so much. Really, I know this is stressful for all of us. And as I said at that faculty meeting, as we move forward, I am committed to meeting with you before board meetings, and as over the course of the next year on a monthly basis, so that we have open communication, so that we can problem solve no matter what happens. So I think that's really important. So I think it's really important for me to address you and rebuild some of the trust. So so thank you for holding me accountable. And then really, I think we have the same interest at the center. What's best for our students. So, so I am recommitting to making sure we engage in the conversation and know that not only myself, but the district recognizes all the work that you do, but this is a hard kind of conversation. So I wanted to say that publicly, part of my comments. And then lastly, I just want to thank the Nashua community. I can't believe it's been one school year already. And I wrote in my memo to you, while we've had some ups and downs, and as we've been saying, things that happened that wasn't on my bingo card a year ago, I can't think of a better place to be. And that is truly to a testament of the strength of this community. Our outside community partners, the adults working with our students on a daily basis. We've been hit with a few punches over the last 10 months, but our team is strong. There's a lot of really committed adults who always have the best interests of the kids in mind to make those decisions. So I just want to thank everybody for making this year truly remarkable and seeing the students progress on a daily basis and that growth. So thank you to the Nashua community for making it another successful year for our students. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Board response to superintendent comments. We'll start over with Ms. Giglio.
The graduations were wonderful, and the rain didn't really matter. It was great to see all our kids graduate, and I echo your thoughts on Mount Pleasant.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you.
I just want to say it was great to see the graduation. Yes, we had a couple of glitches the first night, and the second night we got some rain, but we all weathered, nobody melted in the rain, and it was great because we got to see our students that were part of COVID make it through and graduate and to move on. So that was great. I want to say, yes, it has been a year since Dr. Andrade has come on board in our district. I feel that we've had more open communication among the board, and I think in the community. We're not getting any surprises like we used to. And I want to say thank you. I mean, I know with the redistricting, it's hard for the board with the decisions that are going to have to be made. We know that the middle school has to be made because we got a building that's going to open up a year from this September. So it's going to be a hard thing. Some parents aren't going to like it. I've had kids in school. I get it. You know, if I didn't like it, I was out there protesting and voicing my opinions. Hard to believe that I would do something like that, but I did it. But, you know, it's something that some members of this board, we were not there when these decisions were made, but we have to vote on these decisions and carry it through. What else? And I want to say to Ms. Coffey, thank you for everything you've done. And all these years in the Nashua School District, you had one of my sons in the school, and you did a great job with him. And I'm so glad and proud to know you and meet you at one of the stores that I work at all the time, and we get to have these great conversations. But thank you for everything you've done for all our students over the years.
Thank you. Ms. Oden?
Thank you. I'd like to say congratulations to Sharon Coffey. Not only was she my daughter's assistant principal when she was in high school, she was also the principal or assistant principal at Fairgrounds when she worked at Fairgrounds. So congratulations, you have been a real stable and staple person here in Nashua, and all of your service is appreciated. I also want to congratulate all our graduates. Both graduations, the students really made us proud. It was very well done. Administrators and everybody, there were no backflips going across the stage. There were no cartwheels, as we've seen in the past. They were very respectful, and the speeches were very good. Congratulations to the staff and the students at graduation. And I want to thank Dr. Andrade for meeting with the Mount Pleasant people. I think they appreciate it. And I appreciate you talking about it tonight, because Mount Pleasant has been, for me, a special place. I probably visited that school more times than any other school. Of course, I was at Amherst Street for years, but that was a place I visited often, either international dinners, guest readers, whatever. But thank you for addressing that. I know how hard this has been for those staff members when you teach in a small school like that. Your comrades become your family, and that's what they are seeing there, along with the students. So thank you for addressing that and for meeting with them. I sincerely appreciate your efforts there, and I'm sure they do. Thank you.
Ms. Brown?
I have to echo thank you to Ms. Coffey for being such a pillar in this school district for so long. That's an amazing accomplishment. And congratulations to our graduates. And thank you to Dr. Andrade, because this has been a good year, I think, all things considered. I think we've had some real wins, and I think that it's been refreshing to have you at the helm. Thank you.
Ms. Lamfair?
I just wanted to say congratulations to all the graduates, and it was great to be there. It was like the highlight of the year. It was so much fun to see all the smiles, how excited they were, and what a strong communities each of the schools has. But then the most meaningful for me was the graduation of the kids from the Franklin Street School. They were only, there was a small group, but they've been through so much. And I'm really proud to be part of a school district that makes sure that those kids get what they need to start off successfully, despite everything that might be, that they might have to overcome to even get their high school diploma. It's such a big deal for kids that have struggled, with their families and backgrounds and stuff like that. And it just made me proud to be part of the Nashua School District. So thank you.
Ms. Raymond?
Oh, I don't think I can follow that up. No comments.
Ms. Darling?
I want to echo what everyone else has said about Sharon Coffey. This was my son's first year as a Fairgrounds middle schooler, so I've gotten to see her bustling around the school more than once, and she is always busy, always. She has 50,000 things she is always doing at once. It is incredibly impressive. And I also want to say, you just made me so happy, Dr. Andrade, with the update on Samay Sahu and Armani Rogers. I got to work with them a lot last year, and I could not be more proud to hear how successful they are both becoming, and I wish them so much luck in the future.
Excellent. Thank you. Now off to, let's see, I'm going to guess it's Warren first, and then Dante.
Pardon me, Madam President. I have to
Claffey.
ask permission.
Sorry.
I have to say thank you, Ms. Coffey, for helping me get through my first few years in Yellow House, and most importantly, thank you for persuading Steve McClure not to fire me.
That's good. Sorry, Mr. Claffey, is that it? Yes, he's on mute again. Okay, sorry about that. It's hard to remember when people are not here. So Warren first, and then Dante.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I want to wish a restful and enjoyable summer to all of our students and staff. We should take the next few months to recharge and prepare for the school year ahead. And I know it's really early to start thinking about that, but I think it's important to plan out for the next year. I also want to say thank you to Ms. Coffey. It's hard for me to imagine working in the school district for 45 years, especially when I'm not even 16 yet. I really do believe that it's because of people like you that our district can run so smoothly, and so I just want to say thank you. Also, I want to congratulate our seniors one last time. We are extremely proud of you and excited to see where you go in your careers and the differences you'll make in our world. Congratulations to the class of 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Dante?
Thank you. Oh. Thank you. Is that on? Yeah. Does it work? Thank you. Good evening. Happy summer, and congrats and good luck to all of the recent graduates.
I got it.
Mr. Claffey?
Sorry, I pressed the red button when I was done.
Never press the red button.
All right, back where I was. Happy summer and congrats and good luck to all of the recent graduates, especially Samay going on to Ivy League. Couldn't be more proud to be his successor. And I can't believe Warren and I are already halfway through, or about halfway through with our term. So far, I personally have not had a very strong connection with the students at South, but I've had a few surveys put out that received decent attention. And next year, I hope to be able to gather more significant student input and just overall be more productive. Specifically, I hope to work on updating policy BBBF, that's the student rep policy, just to make it so that student reps could have a symbolic vote. I think I mentioned that before, just like the reps from some other school. It was at that student rep conference that I went to earlier this spring. I think it was Wyndham, I'm not exactly sure, but those reps have some sort of symbolic vote at their meetings, and I feel like that could be helpful just to see what students, just to really see their views. And then I would also like to work with administration to help create consistent policy related to the recovery of summative assessments at the high school level, and I've already been talking with Mr. Posca about that. So other than that, first off, congrats to Ms. Coffey. I was lucky enough to have you as my middle school principal, and I was also lucky enough to be invited by her back to the school this past spring for the National Junior Honor Society. induction ceremony. And yes, definitely congrats for this 45 years. That's a very long time for one district. Anyway, also congrats to the Nashua High School South girls 4x100 meter relay team for coming in first place at the New England Championships for track and field. And then I believe they went on to nationals as well. They broke tons of records this year, school records, state records, meet records, so very good job by them. Also congrats to Santiago Samarastro for getting New Hampshire Gatorade Boys Soccer Player of the Year. As Dr. Andre mentioned, I was lucky enough to play with him. I was on his team, obviously, last fall, and definitely deserves it. So, speaking of sports, be sure to register for fall sports as soon as possible to make everything as smooth as possible going into the new school year. A few more things. The World War II trip that's coming up to Europe that I'll be attending, as well as Warren, although separately, because North and South are going separately. Just wishing everyone a great and safe time. Definitely looking forward to it personally. Rising seniors, be sure to follow the class of 2024 on Instagram to get information on the Senior Sunrise happening in August and to see the link for some new class merch that has already come out for rising seniors. So, thank you.
Thank you. And guys, don't forget, the Sumner Tunnel is closed starting July 5th, so plan an extra 3 hours in and out to Logan the day you fly out.
I leave on July 2nd. So.
Oh, you go earlier?
This Sunday.
We go the 5th. Well, not me, I'm not going, but my kid is. Whatever. Okay, I will hand the floor over to Ms. Johnson for Finance and Operations.
Thank you very much. On June 7th, 2023, the Committee on Finance and Operations had a meeting here in this room. So to start with, I recommend to approve the JROTC obstacle course for installation at Nashua High School North.
Second.
Okay. We had members, and I have my notes here. The sergeant came, and one of the members of the ROTC gave us a presentation. And it's an obstacle course in the back here, all the way in the, well, whichever way you want to point to it, the back of the high school. And it's for the course, and not only will they be allowed to use it, other members of the school and the community will be able to use it. And I think it's a very worthwhile project.
Okay. We have to do all votes by roll call, so Ms. Lamfair?
Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Yes?
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's 9-0, the motion passes.
Okay. I move to approve the purchase of the kitchen equipment from Singer Kittredge for the total amount of $80,648.30, funding to come from the food service revenue account 91.2100.9933120719999.
Second?
I just have a quick question. This is for which school? Is it the new one? Is it Franklin Street?
No, it's the high school.
No, these
High
are,
school?
High school.
Okay.
there's a number of different schools. The high school's a part of it, but there's probably 6 separate items that we're purchasing for different schools.
Okay. Just making sure. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Lamfair?
Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes?
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Okay, so motion passes 9-0. Thanks.
Okay. I move to approve the purchase of the CTE equipment totaling $5,500, funding to come from Trust Fund number 7076.
Second?
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, Ms. Lamfair?
Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Thanks. Motion passes 9-0.
Just hit the speaker button.
It's that button.
Mr. Claffey?
Yeah, I taped my hand behind my back.
Oh, you're looking at me, I'm waiting for him. I move to give the award, the contract to Palmer and Synod of Exeter, New Hampshire, in the amount of $168,525 to refurbish the NHSN cooling tower, fund to come from the district deferred maintenance.
Second?
Question?
Yeah, this.
My question is, I guess to Mr. Donovan. Tonight, this was on your list of items from the unused funds.
Yes.
That was a statement. So is that, by approving this, does it then defer to those unused funds, or does it really matter since we're moving?
Well, I would follow through with the approval of this. We didn't have enough money in the deferred maintenance to pay for it, so we'll pay for it using the excess fiscal year '23 funds.
If we vote for this and the excess funds motion doesn't pass, what happens? I think it will. I'm just curious.
Well, if you don't, it depends on how much you approve,
Okay.
whether we're going to get the funding or not, yes.
Ms. Oden?
Thank you. I was just wondering, this is for North. Are we looking at the possibility of having to do this at South in the near future?
I believe we've already done it at South, and this is for North.
Good, okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. So can you do the roll call?
Sure. Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
I move to award the contract to Clark and Associates in the amount of $864,692.50 to provide occupational therapy services, and to ABC Physical Therapy LLC in the amount of $237,000 to provide physical therapy services for the fiscal year 2024. Funds will come from account 91.1.02.2160-53614.
Second?
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, Ms. Lampier, can you do the roll call?
Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Thanks. Motion passes 9-0.
I move to recommend to accept the April and May 2023 transfer reports.
Second?
Comments, questions? Seeing none, Ms. Lampier?
Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
I have two questions, or one question.
Go ahead.
In our packet was a memo from Mr. Lassard regarding the lead and drinking water contract, but it wasn't on the agenda. I was just curious, was that something that passed finance and needs to be passed here, or doesn't need to be passed here?
It wasn't a contract, it was just an update
Okay.
on the status based on the new laws that the state created.
Okay. Oh, I see. I see that the contract now is not for that. Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to, on the forecast, is that what you're talking about? I move to accept the FY23 budget forecast for June 2023 with an amendment attached to it earlier, that we discussed earlier this evening.
Second.
Do you want to outline what that amendment was?
That's just this
I wrote it down on,
document. We have a different, wait, that doesn't include, does this include, this is separate than the vote to, we have two things, there's going to be two motions.
so Ms.
So
Lampier,
this is
if
just
you
adding
flip
on
in
this
the
sheet of
book,
paper.
I have it all written down.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Do you know where?
Yeah, on the finance.
So if, compared to last week, or when we met before, the
Do you want to have Dan
forecasted, I was going to say, yeah, go ahead, Dan. Take
Mr.
it away.
Donovan, can you explain in much more competent sounding words? I'm not saying you're, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
I was just trying to
In
read these tiny
accountant
numbers.
language.
Well, it was simply an update to the year-end forecast that was provided at the Finance and Ops Committee meeting earlier this month. And it shows a estimated surplus of $2,397,000.
What do you need our motion to say specifically so that we can make sure things like the items that are going now to
That's separate motion.
Yeah.
We'll do that next.
Yeah, this, if you would like to accept the forecast, that's fine. That's all you need to do initially.
Okay. So we're looking for a motion to accept the forecast. And it's written down.
As amended.
Well, we haven't gotten to the amendment yet.
This was the amendment.
That is the amendment. Okay.
That's the
Sorry.
amended.
Yeah, but we've got another, there are two separate motions coming. This is the first one. There's one more.
I just want to make sure Ms. Lampier is writing it down correctly.
Confused.
Right now I have recommendation to approve forecast of surplus funds, or,
It's written, Ms. Raymond wrote it down here.
I can't read it. It says move to approve something, something with additional deferred maintenance.
So maybe I didn't write it down properly. Can you just,
Move to approve expense,
That's the next motion. Well, I'll re-say it when we get to it.
move to increase, yeah, this isn't all the same things.
Okay, why don't we redo this? I'm going to make a motion to approve the FY23 budget forecast for June 2023, and then we'll amend it after.
Okay, so I have motion to approve fiscal year '23 budget forecast. Did I read
Move to approve the amended budget forecast for 2023, 2024. Right?
Yeah.
Yes. So it's moved to approve the amended budget forecast for 2023, 2024.
can I request that document be added to the materials for tonight? Because it's not in our packet and we didn't get it. That we didn't get the new one either.
Yes, it was walked on as I just finished it at about 3:45 this afternoon. So,
Yeah, sounded
yes,
like it was a crazy day.
it will be shared with Ms. Kinsella and then put into your packages.
And you had actual purchases that needed to be done tomorrow, which is why it was
Yes,
imperative that we...
that's the next motion coming up.
Okay. Okay, so we have to do roll call on this vote. So Ms. Lampier?
Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, the motion passes 9-0.
All right, and I'll make the last motion. I move to approve the fiscal year 2023 spend requests with an additional $200,000 added to the deferred maintenance line as presented this evening by Mr. Donovan.
And maybe you add at the end for a total of $1,480,776.
May you say the total again? Sorry, Mr. Donovan.
Fine. $1,480,776.
Thank you.
Mr. Donovan, can you read the highlights of that list for the people who weren't here in the finance meeting at 5:30?
Certainly. The largest item is $700,000 towards deferred maintenance. That will have to go through the escrow process, as I had mentioned earlier, so you can approve that, but that would have to be approved by the Board of Aldermen also. There's one other item, which are new chairs for this room, that would probably also be requested through the escrow process. That's $20,000. And then the three other significant items, the cooling tower that we approved earlier, the $168,000 for that. Boilers, 2 boilers, one for each at Maine Dunstable and Birch Hill, and that's $300,000. And $182,908 for security needs for those 2 schools also.
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Mr. Donovan, could you speak to the $300,000 or the $182,000 for the boilers at Maine Dunstable and Birch Hill, how that changed from before?
The boilers or the security?
I'm sorry, the security, but vestibule. Yeah.
Okay, so the budget for those 2 projects had $100,000 to improve the security so that it would be equal to the other schools in the district. When the quote came in, it was $282,908. So this will allow us to use excess funds to cover that cost, and then the rest of the project won't have to suffer, or we'd have to wait to put the rest of the security in. But one of the main reasons we're doing these renovations are for the safety of the students.
Mm-hmm. So this would, we spoke about this in JSSBC on Thursday. This will prevent us from doing the security improvements in phases. It means we can do it all at once.
Correct.
Because we have to get the first ones done because we're moving trailers in to accommodate the construction. And we need to get security badges and cameras out there in order for us to safely put the kids out in the movables, right?
Correct.
But this means we can do it all now. We don't have to do it over the next 18 months after that.
Yeah, I'm not the construction expert here when they're going to do everything, but it'll be part of the full project and it could be completed at the same time.
We had an in-depth discussion about this at JSSBC, so, and it's nice and fresh, which is why I sound smart. Case. Okay, so can you please do the roll call, Ms. Lampier?
Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
Oh, that's me, yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 9-0.
And that should conclude my reports for this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. You guys had a robust meeting. I will hand the floor over to Ms. Raymond for Committee on Policy.
Thank you. We did that one. Yep, we did approve it. Good? Yeah. Okay. So we met on June 20th. Unfortunately, due to the fact that our policy meeting got squished between 2 other meetings, we had to cut our 90-minute meeting down to 30 minutes. So that's why we don't have a lot to present tonight. So the first thing is policy ACE, procedural safeguards non-discrimination on the basis of handicap or disability. I move that we accept the changes to ACE.
Second.
Okay, and basically the changes there are we have updated this policy with all of the contact information that anyone who has questions or concerns about Nashua's access so that they can contact the appropriate people.
May I speak to it?
Yes.
So this is concerning the procedural safeguards for discrimination. So it's a very verbose law, and we weren't able to change the wording to make it simpler for anyone to know where they would go to look for help. So we were able to add onto the end almost an appendix with a list of like the Parent Information Center and Disability Rights Center and stuff like that, places where people could call or contact if they had any questions. And so we passed that, but then we decided to make it instead of an appendix, it's all just one policy with the law and then followed by the list of help. So just like Ms. Raymond said. I'm just really excited about it. I'm really happy that we got this passed. It looks great, and I think it's going to be easier for people that need resources to find them. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I'd like to thank Ms. Lampier for all the hard work that she did with this, because the best thing that we could do is give parents the rights in order to be able to find out where they need to go to get services for their children. And I would like to thank you, Mr. Pasca, for the hard work. And now this gives a clear, concise readout for parents if they need to get into the policy and they don't know where to go. They can just go there and they can start finding out what they need to do for their child that might have a disability. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Ms. Lampier?
Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 9-0. Thank you.
All right, I move that we rescind policy ACE-R, which was a companion policy, but we've now included all of that information in ACE so that parents have one place to go instead of having to look up multiple policies for the information they're seeking.
Second, sorry.
Comments or questions? Seeing none, Ms. Lampier, can you do roll call?
Sure. Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
I move that we approve policy DHA, contract signing authority, as presented, which is no changes.
Second.
Right, just to speak to it very briefly, recently when we were looking at the paraeducator contract and previously when we looked at the teacher's contract, we found that between the time that the parties agreed and the next board meeting, Mr. Donovan didn't have enough time to go to the city and get the costing sheet to the board with the 3 days that are necessary for us by policy so that we could review them and make an informed vote. So Mr. Donovan was kind enough to go through this policy which outlines how these things happen on a variety of contracts, not just personnel contracts, also utilities, transportation, et cetera. And check his business office operations manual, which lists how things should go. And in fact, it does say that we need to have our materials 3 days in advance. So now everybody is on the same page, and we've reviewed a policy that was needed to be reviewed as well. So did I summarize that? Good.
Any comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Lampier, can you do the roll call?
Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
Ms. Lampier? Oh, sorry, that's me. Yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Thanks. Motion passes 9-0.
Okay.
Okay, and I move that we approve policy JLCF, the wellness policy as presented.
Second.
This policy has significant revisions. It is 9 pages long, and it has been completely rewritten from the bottom up to comply with some changes in both state and federal guidelines, and some changes in how some grants operate to make sure that we continue to get the money that we need to get to feed our kids. So I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to a couple items in your packet. I don't know what page it is in the packet, I think 83, but it's page 4 of 9 of the policy and page 5 of 9. No, I'm sorry. 4 of 9 on the policy. It speaks to the fact that this policy and also the law require us to have a wellness committee, which we had years ago in the past. I think Ms. Oden was a member of it, but it kind of fell to the wayside during COVID. And so if we approve this policy tonight, the board and administration will need to work together to create a wellness committee. That committee, if it has more than 2 board members on it, because 2 board members is a quorum, would have to comply with the open meetings law. So my recommendation is that we assign 1 board member to it so that it is not an open meeting. This committee has to meet 4 times a year. It must include parents, guardians, students, district and school administrators, physical education teachers, classroom teachers, health professionals, school support personnel, nutrition services staff, a school board member, and community health professionals. To the extent possible, the Wellness Committee should include representatives from each school site and reflect the diversity of the community. So it's a big ask, and the committee has to meet 4 times a year and write a report to us that's due every September. So my hope is that we can approve the policy this summer, so that administration can start recruiting people in the fall, and we can see how well we do with getting this massive unwieldy committee together. The other thing to note about the policy is that the USDA is asking school districts to refer to the Alliance for Healthier Generation for model wellness programs and for lists of appropriate foods. Our previous policy had a list of food and beverages that were acceptable and not acceptable. This policy allows it to be a little bit more dynamic and basically says we need to comply with whatever the state and federal guidelines are, instead of having our own special national guidelines. Did I miss anything, Mr. Posca?
No, I agree with everything you said. I also want to take a special note to Dahlia Daigle, our Director of Food Services. This was the impetus. She brought this to our attention because in August of 2022, the federal guidelines had changed. So in order for us to be able to apply for some federal funding, we had to update our policy. So that was the impetus behind this policy update.
Okay, great. And I think we should also note that Mr. Farley had come to us with the Student Senate at North, has been working on this policy as well, and some things regarding some, was it?
Fundraising.
Yeah, some competitive food and beverages under that part of the policy. So the students have been working really hard on making sure that what they needed for their DECA program is also in here. So. Anything else? I think that's it.
So this means if these guys come up with one of the 9 fundraisers for the year, y'all can finally get that coffee you've wanted in the high school for the last 15 years.
Exactly, yeah.
Good job, Warren.
It's not just me. There's a lot of background work, especially from Student Senate and even Student Senates before then. So obviously, hopefully it's passed tonight, but this is not a short time making. This has been years and years and years in process. So
yeah, but you get to be there when it actually happens.
Exactly, yeah.
So take the win, man.
I'll take it.
So actually, right. I think a close reading of it shows that it doesn't actually fall under fundraising. It falls under the competitive foods, which covers like snack carts and a la carte options. So nonetheless, it still must comply with the federal guidelines. So, and that will leave up to the principals.
Yep. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
What are the federal guidelines on coffee?
It has no nutritional qualities to it.
Good gracious.
Why does the Army prescribe you, the Army recruiters still have you do the 3-day coffee diet to lose weight quick?
All right, so I'm not going to comment on the 3-day coffee diet, but I will say that the federal government and the state government have established top thresholds for the number of calories per 12-ounce beverage and the amount of caffeine for the 12-ounce beverage and calories for a 12-ounce beverage. So calories is what actually keeps sodas out of our school because there's so much sugar, it exceeds the caloric intake. Coffee squeaks under the caffeine limit, but we're going to have to be careful about how they offer the coffee, because if it's, we're not going to be offering mocha
Dark roast.
lattes or frappuccinos or whatever, because those will go over the caloric intake. And I'm not in charge of figuring that out. We have left the managing of all of that to district personnel who know more about this than me.
In case anyone was curious, 400 milligrams caffeine daily, that's your highest recommended dose.
Yeah, that is above.
That is highest recommended dose for adults. Letting y'all know.
Yeah, it's significantly above what will be allowed in the schools.
I keep seeing kids with
America
Red Bulls,
runs
and
on
I've been trying to
Dunkin'.
figure out where they're getting them.
Well, we won't be selling Red Bull.
Man, it takes me like 3 days to drink a soda. I think soda's disgusting.
Yeah, I don't remember what the exact numbers are, but like a Coca-Cola is too much.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to go play in the rain, Ms. Johnson?
No, I'm saying let's keep it going for a while. You
guys
hear it
hear it
hitting
over
the
the
roof, how
TV,
bad
it's
it is.
pounding.
A couple of questions.
Yeah.
I think one maybe. So if we have 2 board members, then the committee has to become a public meeting. Why wouldn't we want it open to the public to hear what's going on in this meeting?
I think the biggest challenge for complying with the right to know law and a committee is having a physical space to have the meeting with the number of people that need to be there, having a quorum of those members, and having it properly noticed and sent out and being open to the public. Since this requires the inclusion of a significant proportion of staff, we cannot be having them at nighttime and having compulsory attendance. And we don't want the public coming to a meeting in our school in the middle of the school day for safety reasons. So, my suggestion is that we don't have a quorum of board members to start, and then allow the committee to come and present their information to the board, which they're required by law to do, where the public can come in and have input. But instead, allow the community to have representation on the committee. Again, my biggest issue is security, and it's getting people where it can be properly noticed and available to the public in a way that doesn't threaten the safety of our students.
Well, that's part of my concern, because I'd like to have members of the committee, especially parents, to be involved in this, because their kids that are eating the foods and making sure that they like what's being served to their children. And I think it's important that parents get involved in this, too.
Yep, I agree. And frankly, I'd rather have parents on it than us. Do you know what I mean? I don't feel like this particular committee doesn't feel like a board committee so much as it feels like a district committee, and we're just kind of there to be included, but not necessarily to be making decisions.
Thank you.
Ms. Brown?
So as a follow-up to that, what would be the process for selecting the committee members?
I think administration could probably answer that.
I think, yeah, that would be our next step, Ms. Brown, and I think one of the key aspects of that policy is to the extent possible. I think they listed a variety of different people going to be on there, and we know how difficult it is to get all of these people to commit to a meeting. So wanted to give ourselves some flexibility as we put this, as this policy hopefully gets approved, so then we can start planning. But I think to Ms. Johnson's credit, and what Ms. Raymond and I spoke about, is the fact that we wanted to be transparent that about this need. If there were 2 committee members on there, it becomes a right to know issue.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Ms. Lampier, can you do the roll call?
Okay, Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Excellent. Motion passes 9-0.
So policy meets again in July. We have a number of things that were on our agenda last time that are now being pushed to July. And I just wanted to also note, for those who weren't able to tune in, there was a lot of discussion about leveling. There's been a lot of rumors about leveling. In our packets last week, as part of the policy committee packet was a memo from Mr. Posca giving an update to the policy committee where the middle school steering committee is on that. And I wondered if Mr. Posca could just briefly catch us up.
Sure. I think over the last 7 months, the Middle School Steering Committee has really dove into addressing some of the concerns, and one of those was, was from Ms. Raymond looking at the middle level policy. So as part of that, we've had about 24 or so members from all 3 schools participate in this work over the last several months, involved kind of researching previously done work by the Middle School Steering Committee, as well as looking at some new research and evidence is presented, and then having some open dialogue about this. We've had some great conversations, and I think respectful conversations, because I think there's been a variety of different viewpoints. At this time, we're not, we've made great strides, but in fairness to where we are, and kind of the reality is the clock ran out on us at the end of the year. We just ran out of time to continue to have these conversations. So the good news is we're in a great position to continue this work come September, and hopefully in the early fall, we'll be based upon the recommendation from the Middle School Steering Committee, we will be bringing a recommendation of the board regarding leveling at the middle school level.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else from policy?
Nope. Stay tuned.
Okay. If you need, I would suggest if we're going over like 7 policies during a policy committee meeting, maybe do 2 a month, and then we can address them at each of the board meetings, because policy tends to be a bigger agenda than the actual agenda.
Yep.
So maybe we start looking at breaking that up so it's a little bit more manageable in each of the meetings.
I have no objection to that. I mean, I think this month the biggest thing was simply scheduling. With graduation and such, all the meetings got squished into like one night.
Right. And then they had the one at the budget meeting for, they needed all hands on deck for videotaping that, so. Okay, I will hand the floor over to Ms. Brown for Committee on Curriculum and Evaluation.
Thank you. We met on June 26th also, on June 20th, 2023, and we only had one recommendation from there, and I move to approve the purchase of the CKLA materials for the 12 elementary schools to be funded by the Lean into Literacy grant in the amount of $300,000.
Can I have a second for that? Ms. Darling, thank you. Comments or questions? Ms. Oden?
Thank you. I just have a question. What kind of materials are we getting?
So I think we're getting books. Actually, Dr. Andrade, would you like to take that?
I don't know if it was reviewed during the subcommittee, but I mean, you might have a little more.
Yeah, so we, one of the things that they're doing with the science of reading, lots of professional development surrounding reading, and also moving away from some of the reading resource materials that we have previously been using, that to get more up-to-date literature, things that work better, are more suited for how we now know students actually learn to read, particularly at the elementary school level. So, go ahead.
Yeah, if I can just add, so it's updated resources, so the number of books, but really about the classroom libraries, and Dr. Softy has talked about these grants in the past over the last couple months. There was a presentation, I think 2 months ago, about the science of reading here as well. So it's really just a grant to support that, but it is the opportunity to get new resources in every student's hands at the elementary level.
And they really were, Dr. Sarfy was very passionate about the quality of these materials and how they really are going to facilitate learning better than what we currently are using.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Ms. Lamphere?
I just wanted to say that from what Dr. Sarfty said, this was the largest grant of this kind that was given in the state this year for the Lean Into Literacy grant. So it took a lot of hard work to get it, and I'm just really happy that our schools are qualifying for this kind of stuff to help our kids. So I'm going to be happy to approve it. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Ms. Lamphere, can you do the roll call?
Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Miss Oden?
Yes.
Miss Lampier? Oh, shit. Sorry. That's me, I'm a yes. Miss Johnson?
Yes.
Miss Bishop?
Yes.
Miss Gilio?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes 9-0.
Thank you.
I also, that's our only motion for this evening. I also want to thank the coaches that came in to give us a presentation on some updated math curriculum. We actually got to have a lesson right in our curriculum meeting. It was very good, very well presented, and it was an opportunity for students with different learning styles to be more engaged in mathematics curriculum. And this, the schools that have taken advantage of that coaching, the students are showing real-time results in their iReady and their SAS testing. So that's been great so far. So thank you to those coaches that are doing their good work.
Yeah, that presentation was really neat. I was able to watch it once it was up and on YouTube, but it was really neat. So, okay, moving on. On to Ms. Gilio's Human Resources Committee.
Hi. I'm looking for a recommendation to suspend the rules to consider items from the HR committee meeting held earlier this evening.
So moved.
Thank you.
Oh, do you need a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. But did you roll call?
Okay. Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 9-0.
Thank you. I'm looking for, our committee recommends to approve the personnel recommendations of June 26, 2023, as listed.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Oi.
Oh, no.
Our ghost member.
Hello?
Wrong number.
Bad Wi-Fi.
I'm glad you figured out how to call in, Mr. Claffey, because I think in previous meetings, like 45 minutes goes by before somebody looks at their phone and goes, oh, shoot. Somebody was calling in. Okay, Ms. Lampier, can you do the roll call?
Sure. Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Gilio?
Yes, and thank you.
Motion passes 9-0.
Okay. Would you like to do the liaison report for JSSPC?
Sure. Okay, so for the McCarthy Middle School, the finished furniture package should be presented in August, and the Penachuk has no new issues right now. For Birchill and Maine Dunstable, the state fire marshal permitting is complete, and for 55 Franklin, permit for a kitchen is received, and some minor site readjustments. They're going to add a half basketball court for the older kids, which is on the opposite side of the building from the playground where the little kids will be. Penachuk, the track resurfacing is beginning, and it's going to be closed through July into the first week of August, and that will be posted around the school as well as on the electrical sign outside the school. McCarthy, the track has been paved. Softball and baseball fields are taking shape. 55 Franklin, the roof replacement will begin in the next week or so, so it might have already begun. And they're going to be busy over there this summer. And for Birchill and Maine Dunstable, the Elm Street portables will be transported the week of June 26th. And that's it. Oh, yes, for the playgrounds. The playground at Birchill, right? I think it was Birchill. Is it just Birch Hill or Birch Hill and Main Dunstable?
That they're both closed?
Yes, okay, so both of the playgrounds for Birch Hill and Main Dunstable will be closed through the summer because of the portable classrooms being put in, the work being done at the schools.
Thank you. Yeah. And special thanks to the DPW who were able to hold on to the, like the big cement things that go on the ground that the trailers sit on. They apparently held them and stored them and then dropped them off and then are coming back and picking them up, creating a huge saving for us by just being nice guys and picking them up and hoisting them around for us. So I love it when all of the city departments work together and make things easy, and we're grateful for their extra effort. Okay, so now we are going into unfinished business. Do you want to put the projector down? Okay, so obviously we're going into the discussion about the middle school, not the discussion, the vote on the middle school lines. This has obviously been on the agenda now 5 times. So 5 times people have been able to come in and do public comment. We've been able to ask administration questions. We have had the entire time, including an additional 3 weeks of one-on-one time available to meet with the consultant to review public concerns, further administration concerns, and our working knowledge of the city. So the two, nobody sent me anything, so I don't think we have any new maps that anybody else worked on. So the 2 options that are being presented tonight, and we can make amendments and move them, are these 2 maps. I think I feel like we've discussed this a lot, so if anybody has anything new to add, I would love to hear it. But at this point, we are looking at making a motion to accept one of the maps with or without amendments, hopefully without, because it should have been, oh my God, I'm like moving it like it's an iPad. So hopefully that there isn't too much discussion. It should have already been done in the last several meetings. But Ms. Giglio?
I have a concern about the population of, the projected population of Pennachuck being well over 100 students more than either of the other 2 middle schools. And when I first joined the JSSBC, my first year on the board, I was led to understand that we were going to try to keep them with kind of sort of equivalent populations, and I'm just not understanding why Pennachuck is so much bigger.
So Pennachuck was bigger. I can speak to that because that was part of my change, was because the Birch Hill families were expressing a lot of concern about being moved with their elementary school lines. So when I moved the lines to have for the Birch Hill students, more of the Birch Hill students go back to Birch Hill, that's how the numbers became uneven. However, I've spoken with Dr. Andrade, and I think just saying, let's just take the Broad Street kids and the kids who are going to Broad Street, because my goal is not to split up elementary schools into different middle schools, even though it's kind of how we've always done it. We don't have to do everything we've always done. That's how we never progress. But how about we make a change for the Broad Street students to go down to McCarthy, and then Birch Hill goes up to Pennachuck. And there you have, how many students are at Broad Street, Dr. Andrade? Roughly?
Just around 310, give or take, about 20 students, so.
And McCarthy can take up to 900, right? And it's at 400, 4 something right now?
Yep.
So is anybody, so one of the options that we have is moving Broad Street in. So if we want to make a motion to accept one of the maps as amended with Broad Street going to McCarthy.
So the map I'm looking at actually has Broad Street going to McCarthy. So I'm not sure which of the 2. It might be the one on the right.
Because this is the line for Broad Street.
Right.
This is the road.
Pick up your
So
microphone.
if you go over
Jen,
here.
Pick up your microphone, Jen.
Well,
I know it's a pain.
I feel like Vanna White. So this map over here is the one that I did on the right, okay? I moved that line down to the river for a natural division line so that Broad Street goes up. So this one has the Broad Street line pushed up, which is what the Birch Hill parents were upset about. That one over there is the Birch Hill line pushed down, so it's Broad Street. So I moved Birch Hill and Broad Street to Pennachuck. What I'm saying is move Broad Street, which is, we don't know what that line is going to be because we haven't decided on elementary school lines, but it's either going to be the current Broad Street, where it is, it goes to McCarthy, or it's the Broad Street, at some point, we'll decide this whenever, I guess we feel like it. If Broad Street has the extra 40 kids from Birch Hill, they would also go to McCarthy.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Kind of.
What's your question?
No, I
What's your
just,
thought?
no, I just, so prior to the one on the right, was Pennachuck's numbers, were their numbers much lower than they are when we're looking at
think by
778?
I think by 80 students it was.
So Pennachuck would be smaller if we go with the map on the left?
Right.
And do we know the exact amount? Oh, there it is, okay, I see it.
So if we're taking,
Okay, so it would be 702 rather than 778, and it would increase McCarthy's a little.
well, we really, yeah, and I mean, we really can't do official numbers because we don't have official elementary lines yet.
Yeah.
So we're looking at roundabouts.
No,
So we know Broad Street can handle 400 kids?
Yeah.
So if Broad Street can handle 400 kids, we can send them down to McCarthy still comfortably.
Okay, all right, now I understand, thank you.
Right, so we're still working in like fake numbers until we have, other lines.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, Ms. Oden, and Ms. Brown.
Okay. I remember when we came on the board, the whole idea, excuse me, of this redistricting and building the middle school, because they wanted, Dr. Mosley wanted everything equal, equal, equal. The same amount, which we all knew it couldn't be because you'd have kids coming in and out in different areas. But you still, if I'm looking correctly, Fairgrounds would still have the least amount of students if we're looking on that side. That's the original. Now, which one are we going to, 620 or the 608?
So the fairgrounds would stay the same if we throw the Broad Street kids into McCarthy instead of Pennachuck.
And we would bring it to 660 on this side or that side? The board.
It depends on what you're looking at. I mean, if you're looking at the original scenario.
Yep.
So do you want to go back to the other one? So in the original scenario, these are the numbers.
Right.
So if we go with, can you go back, Dr. Andrade? I was about to say Mosley because we were just talking about Mosley. And if you look over here to the modified version, if we push that line up so that Broad Street goes to McCarthy, can you go back to the second one? Then you're looking at the board edited scenario and you're taking out the amount of kids that would be coming from Broad Street, so in each class, going into McCarthy. And how many kids are in the 5th grade class? You want to say like 80?
About 70.
70?
Yeah.
So we're looking at, let's say 100. We can still comfortably move 100 kids into McCarthy, and then Pennachuck is down to 678, roughly. Well, it was Miss Johnson, then Miss Oden.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Miss Oden?
Yeah, I think we need more definite numbers if we do that, if we do this or that. But when I see Pennachuck Middle School under one of the plans having 778 students, which is more than the new middle school, that just makes no sense to me.
we built this middle school to hold more students. At the time, they were talking about equality, 800 students at each school. And to have 778 students at Pennachuck, and 669 scheduled for McCarthy, that just makes no sense. To build a 3-level school as much as we did, $90 million, and I just think it's underutilized or underpopulated, while Pennachuck is paying a heavy price for this. It looks like to me you'd need another administrator at Pennachuck. I don't know where it would be, at the middle school, the new middle school, or at Fairgrounds. I'm guessing those numbers aren't a whole lot different from the things, but, you know, bringing in, well, maybe this and maybe that, if we move one, we need those numbers. I need those numbers now if I'm going to vote tonight.
So if we know how many students are currently graduating from Broad Street and going into a middle school, we can say, Dr. Andre just said roughly that's about 75 kids. So if we take, can we stop with the back chatter just for a second? So if we take the 78 or the 75 kids who are graduating 5th grade and going into the middle school, that takes 75 kids out of Pennachuck and into McCarthy, which makes them pretty even.
And they're all from Broad Street?
If we take all of the Broad Street kids and move them to McCarthy. And then whatever line that is, so what I recommended in the elementary school line adds 40 students to Broad Street. So even if we put, and if that's per each grade, that's like, let's say, 10 kids a grade. So you're either moving 78 kids out of Pennachuck and putting them into McCarthy, or you're taking 88 kids out of Broad Street and putting them into McCarthy.
Well, we had several sessions of listening to parents and hearing them out. And tonight, you want to say, we're going to take Broad Street, whose kids could walk to North, take them out of North and send them down to the other end of the city?
That's the middle school.
But we're going to send them down to the middle school when they could go up to Pennachuck.
Because you don't want the Pennachuck numbers to be 778. What other recommendation do you have to flip the numbers around?
Well, I thought we had.
In the first scenario here, with splitting up Birch Hill, with all of those parents who said they did not want that to happen, this is the first scenario, that brings Pennachuck's numbers to 702 if we do the first scenario elementary school redistricting. Right, I feel like we have a fundamental misunderstanding that these elementary school lines were drawn thinking about the elementary schools. So those numbers reflect the changes in the elementary school that was presented.
I don't know. I'm confused.
Ms. Brown?
I understand everyone's consternation about making forward movement on this tonight. We have to realize that we're never going to have exactly 100% concrete numbers, because there's always students moving in and out of the district. There's always students moving in and out of different elementary schools, middle schools within the district. There's always students, you know, as they get older, maybe their family lives in the same house for 20 years and they're no longer elementary students, they're now high school students, and their parents continue to live there while they're in college and retirement and so on. So there will never be a time that we can get the exact pinpointed number of students to make this work. So I think if that's what we're waiting on, then we will be waiting forever. So I think we need to take that into consideration, that maybe under one scenario, Pennachuck has 778 students this year, but 2 years from now it has 750, and McCarthy has 720 or whatever. So I think we should be a little bit more lenient when we're looking for those kind of specifics. 150, yeah, that's worth discussing. But when we're talking fewer than 100, honestly, probably the way the city's changing and the landscape is changing and the areas that we're building in, those numbers are going to vary a little bit over the next couple of years.
I saw Ms. Darling, Ms. Raymond, and then Ms. Johnson, and then Ms. Gilio.
So my question is, when we were first working on the scenarios with Preston, he had showed us like student count per square foot for each building. And this could be me just being completely off on like spatial reasoning. I feel like when we went to view McCarthy that it was very large. I know that we do have the medical intensive program going in there, and that right there is like its own population. But if we were to remove that like area and take the square footage for the remainder of the school, does it equal the same rough student per square foot as the other two schools do? Because I think that to me is what equality would look like, is if the size of the school, the resources of the school match the population. And I've only been in Pennachuck twice, and never further than the office. I just know they have great artwork on the walls. But like I've been through fairgrounds, and they're, like, to me at least when I'm walking through, it seems almost like the perfect population to teacher ratio. Now, please, teachers from fairgrounds, don't come for me in my sleep. I swear I'm not in every classroom. I don't know the facts there. It just looks nice from when I walk in. But how does the equality stand out for square foot? Do we know?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to punt that over to Dr. Andrade.
So McCarthy, even with the special education classrooms, still can accommodate 800 students. And so that's taken into account. So if you remove the special education classrooms, we'll have that extra. I think when we looked at the numbers from McCarthy, I think you could have close to like 1,100 students like that. So you could put more students if you remove the special education classroom. So with the special education classrooms, it easily can house 800 students. We were cautious on scenario 1. The Pennachuck addition in McCarthy, their classrooms are bigger than fairgrounds. And so we were purposely trying to keep fairgrounds as the smallest, as you said, class size or student to teacher ratio. So I know in the past, Dr. Mosley said it would be great if they were all 800. 800 students at fairgrounds would be extremely, extremely tight. So we leaned more heavily onto Pennachuck and McCarthy for the higher numbers. But again, in this scenario, I do agree that having 778 students at Pennachuck is, I would like to see McCarthy a little higher than Pennachuck.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Raymond?
Can you go back to the two maps? Thank you. I've pulled up the north and south lines to try and figure out where the splits are in the schools based on the boundaries. Because we know, because those lines aren't changing. And so with both scenarios, it looks like McCarthy's going to be split it. Yeah, with both scenarios, is McCarthy splitting between south and north?
Well, there are 3 middle schools going into 2 high schools, so that's going to happen.
Right. And it almost looks to me like Fairgrounds is splitting between south and north as well in both scenarios.
I think Fairgrounds is still going entirely to south.
So there was and Mr. Posca can expound on it, but when the high school principals and the high school team worked with Mr. Smith, there was a couple pockets that were anomalies. And I think one of the beauties about the high school staff or the administration in the amount of great programming in both buildings, that we do have a number of students that go back and forth. And so, and I think to Ms. Brown's point, that we have to be cautious that, this is going to be a transition period. It's not going to be perfect. So we have to look at the numbers on a year-to-year basis. But the high school administration said if a student lives on this neighborhood and they're supposed to be at South, but they were going to North, and it's 20 students, they'll encourage those families for a variance and just stay with their students, their friends from the middle school. So I think there was 2 or 3 neighborhoods that the high school acknowledged and said, we don't have to go crazy, but we'll work with those families. And then just, again, we have the variance process. That we can make those adjustments on a yearly basis, because one year it might be 15 students in that neighborhood, another year it might be 5, it might be 20. So again, I think the beauty of a tight-knit community is that we can reach out to those families, we can identify those neighborhoods and make those adjustments. So I think it is going to be messy. However we decide, I think as a former high school principal, when I do the master schedule, I'm really happy when I can get about 95 to 98% there, and then the rest of it's hand scheduling. So I think what we need to come up with is what's our master schedule, and then what's going to be the tweaks, what are those 2 or 3 streets that are impacted, because a line has to go somewhere. And if you're on that line, you may or may not like what happens, but if you were 2 streets over, you're like, oh, that's perfectly fine because it doesn't impact me. So I think we have to get to that 98% kind of place, and then work with families and in schools over the next couple of years to make those tweaks. And I would hope even from tonight that we can revisit a year after the middle school's open to say, what was those unforeseen consequences that came up that we didn't plan for?
And that makes sense. The last time, the high school lines aren't, they're old now, it's almost 20 years, but the middle school and elementary lines haven't been done in a generation. So, we certainly know that there are population shifts across the city. The other question that I had was regarding the 2 maps, because coming into this weekend, before I got the packet on Friday, my understanding was that the committee that was formed to do the redistricting committee to do this came up with the map on the left, yes? And then I was going through all of my emails, and I still don't have the feedback from the forums, but based on my emails, I didn't have any parents or community members reaching out to me with edits requested regarding the middle schools. There were a lot of emails requesting edits to elementary school lines, but I didn't see any for middle schools. So without that forum feedback, was there significant feedback from the forums regarding the middle schools?
Not at the middle school level.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gilio?
Could you put up the capacities again? The question was just, okay. So it makes sense to me, looking at the one on the left, that McCarthy would have the greatest number of students, because as I was led to believe several years ago, we're creating special resources for a lot of special ed students, and with the hope of bringing some of our out-of-district students back into the district. So I would clearly expect McCarthy, having been built for that purpose, to have the largest population. So that looks more reasonable to me. Anyway, that's just my opinion.
May I?
Ms. Brown?
I think in relation to that relationship, I understand what you're saying, and I think you're accurate. But these numbers you have to make sure that you recognize that these are based on the students that live in the neighborhoods assigned to the schools, as opposed to students that may be living outside of the McCarthy School District that will be bused to the schools if they have the need. So there could be students that would be typically going to Fairgrounds or Pennachuck that will be bused over to McCarthy if they have that need. So that will bump the McCarthy numbers up for students in need.
So I did the numbers here. Fairgrounds stays the same at 620. So if we go with option 2, which has the feedback from the forums and from, in regards to the elementary school lines not being so mixed up. If we go with the number 2, that brings Pennachuck to 700 kids and McCarthy to 747. So that does push McCarthy up and allows for more stability.
So can I ask a question to the group? So is the main question we're asking at this point whether we want Broad Street students to go to McCarthy or Pennachuck? Is that what the kind of like where the crux we're at right now? Is that's what I feel like is going on here?
Well, they don't want the Pennachuck numbers to be that big.
So that's the question. Will Broad Street be going to Pennachuck or McCarthy? I think, is that the
I'm
what the bottom
thinking
line?
make an amendment on the map that I put up that has Broad Street now going to McCarthy instead of Pennachuck.
So that's what I'm saying. I just was curious, is that what is holding people back from their worry? Is that the tipping point?
It's got to do with the population. I just think that the numbers, and I know that that's going to change, and I know that some of the students are going to need to be transported to the new middle school, to McCarthy, for special services, but I'm still concerned that Pennachuck is going to have a higher population than the new middle school, which we built to accommodate a lot of these special needs. It doesn't make sense to me that one of the other 2 middle schools are going to have a higher population than McCarthy. That it has nothing to do with where Broad Street goes, as far as my concern goes. That's it.
All right. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I'm going to agree with Ms. Oden and Ms. Giglio, because if Fairgrounds is the smallest of the schools, then their population would be less because they're the smaller schools. If McCarthy's the bigger of the school, and this is no disrespect for special needs, I'm just taking them out of the equation right now. Your population, we built this middle school because of the population, and no studies were done. So now what's happening, we're going to move here to here. It's like a chess game. And who's going to be the king? Is Queen's going to take over the king? And as a taxpayer, I'm annoyed with this, because we shouldn't be in this situation trying to figure out how we're going to redistrict, because the man who sat in that seat, who was a superintendent, lied to this whole community about this whole thing. He didn't do his homework to show that the student population was dropping. We didn't need a school as big as this. We could, and again, I'm going to irradiate whatever I would say, I can't talk tonight, I'm too exhausted, is the fact that we could have done it probably with 2 schools, and we could have eliminated this whole thing, and the students could have been kind of like going into the high school populations, and they probably would have been staying. So now we've got to figure out, okay, Fairgrounds should have the lowest population because of the fact that it is the smaller school. So that means Pennachuck and McCarthy should be divided out more evenly, so you're spreading that population, and that we're not looking at the special needs, because that's a whole different category. Because if we're going to bring them back, they're in their own separate wings. We're talking about the other population of students, and that's what we need to divide it out. And this is a nightmare. This has just turned into a nightmare because the population is going down. And it's not about Broad Street, it's not about Birch Hill. It's about, we built this $90 million school that the money could have been used for another school probably. And we put all the resources into this with bonding, and look at the numbers. It's a complete nightmare, it's a complete mess. So I guess we need to just flip a coin and say, where are we gonna put these kids? This is just horrible. Thank you.
Ms. Oden.
Yeah, I guess what bothers me, here we are on the night we're supposed to make a decision, and I don't think we're ready at all. I don't think this has been thought out. I'm just hearing now, well, we can send Broad Street down someplace else. This is a decision that needs to be made with logic and input and communication. And I bet there are people sitting at home thinking, this isn't where my child was supposed to go.
I think we maybe need to reset. At this point, I'm looking at the original document that we had, the original scenario, which gave us 601 at Fairgrounds, 702 at Pennachuck, and 757 at the new middle school. And, you know, I just think making a big change like this that is going to surprise people at this time, I just think it's wrong. I can't support it.
Making any decision at all, or?
No, I could take the original one that was brought forward, but I can't take the changed one, and then I guess it was changed, and then change it again and have the Broad Street students go down to McCarthy. I just think it's too late in the game to make a change like that and to vote on it tonight. I think people will be very upset, and I can understand why.
I'd like to make a motion to have a special meeting to review this whole thing, for us to sit down and go through this whole thing and see how we can better, I don't want to say distribute, have it balance a little bit better, because this is nonsense. I agree, I can't vote on this tonight. I just can't.
Dr. Andrade?
So, again, I want to just reiterate the process. There was a team of people, and Ms. Johnson knows, who worked with Mr. Smith and worked through the different scenarios. I think, again, there was about 25 people on the team, met with Mr. Smith 4 different times to go through street by street and look at the data to run through the scenarios. That was presented to the BOE in March. There was 4 or 5 different scenarios that we came up with. What's hard is that there was a lot of work that went into, but every time there's a comment made saying we want different numbers, we have to run the numbers again. And it's a street by street, it's our data analysts counting kids. So to say that we haven't run the numbers, we have run the numbers. And again, we have to get to a point of making a decision on these are the lines so that we can run the scenarios. Because we could talk scenario A, B, C, and D, but if we don't know the lines, it's hard for us to run the analysis without anything concrete. And again, I think the original intent was to have a scenario, make minor tweaks to it, or get the comments. I think Ms. Bishop tried to make those comments. I think, again, as Ms. Bishop said, everyone had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Smith and to run through the different scenarios to see what their calculations would be, and then to come back. And we can kind of continue to do that, but I think what Ms. Bishop did on the right was to take into account some of the comments that were made at the community forums, that were made online, make some of those tweaks, and then it came out with new numbers. And I guess when you make those new numbers, or the new lines, it comes into a scenario like this, which I think, again, in my opinion, Pennachuck is still too high, and where's that kind of compromise? But we as a district and with our data analysts need something concrete. Like, we can't be running 25 different scenarios based on whims, like at the whim. Like, if Mr. Foster was here tonight, it would take us a long time to rerun it, because it's, can you move this street, can you move this street, what's the age of this student? So we need some direction from the board on where are we at, so we can come back to you. I think a working session we have to be working on something solid, not just in the spur of the moment, can you move 2 kids or a line. If we move 25 students, it may or may not be in the right neighborhood to move that line. So again, I go back to the analogy of that master scheduling. We need something that's almost there, and let us hand schedule the rest of the students.
Ms. Darling, then Ms. Raymond.
Dr. Andrade, if you were to pick one of these scenarios, which one would you pick?
So I think the one on the left is our 95%, and I agree with some of the comments. So it's a hybrid. So I wouldn't touch Pennachuck up top, but I might make the adjustment down to the fairgrounds. McCarthy, it's a couple, it's not many students, it's not that big of an impact. So that's, you know, some of the comments that came in. So I might make the adjustment there, but I will leave Pennachuck alone. So the top half of slide 1 and the bottom half of slide 2.
So that's my offered amendment, is what you're doing is you're moving my purple line over here back up to Broad Street, which is now, the Broad Street students are going underneath Broad Street. So that is taking the top half of this map and the bottom half of that map, because that was the bicentennial students' parents' concerns, because these guys were now going to New Searles, but they live across the street from Bicentennial, right?
That's elementary school.
So it's the bottom half of that map with the top half of that if we just move the purple line up to Broad Street.
And that won't change the numbers too much.
It changed the numbers by what? Right.
So if we were to put through the motion to have it amended, you know, keep the top half of one and bottom half of the other, tentatively, is there a way at our next meeting that we could get what exactly those numbers look like in order to appease the people that do like the numbers, and also that gives another couple of weeks for the public to sit with the new hybrid map that we'd be making and tell us all of their quips, qualms, quotes?
Yeah, so, yes.
Ms. Raymond?
So I just want to be clear that the changes on this map for the middle school are based on the elementary school feedback, not feedback that parents asked for where their middle schoolers are going, correct? Okay.
It's so that the middle school lines match up with elementary school lines.
But we're not deciding the elementary school lines tonight. I feel like we.
Which is why I said there shouldn't be two separate votes.
And, well, I think we're trying to, like, eat a whole apple instead of taking it in bites. I guess, you know, my inclination is to trust some of the work that has been done. Like, I personally didn't meet with Mr. Smith for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons I didn't meet with him was because I just didn't think it was appropriate for 9 individuals to try and change the work that the 25 people had done together and presented to us twice before coming up to a final thing and then presenting it to parents. And without feedback from the community specifically on the middle schools, I'm hesitant to make top-down level changes at this hour. So, I mean, I think I'm not for Ms. Johnson's motion, which is still floating out there, to have a special meeting. I would, at this point, I would want to approve either the original map or the original map with the tiny tweak that Dr. Andrade is endorsing.
May I ask a question when you're ready?
Go ahead, Mr. Claffey.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Ms. Raymond, and I was wondering, because I heard what Ms. Oden said about the original plan, if you could pull up the original map that was posted at the district website.
It's up there, Mr. Claffey.
Okay, I don't see it yet, but I'm lagging a bit. So the very first plan is up there.
Oh, never mind. He doesn't have it.
I thought when Ms. Oden asked a question, she wasn't referring to something we were seeing.
So just for clarification, Mr. Claffey, are you referring to the current district mapping, the one that was presented by the redistricting team, or the one that was amended or modified by Ms. Bishop?
The plan that was recommended by the district team.
Yeah, that's up on the screen.
So that's on the left?
Yes.
That's still there, huh? And so when Ms. Oden asked about the plan that she supported, I think she said she supported, based on the numbers that would be going to the new middle school. Is that the one we're seeing on the left?
Yes.
So, I guess Ms. Oden, how do you feel about the map on the left?
At this point, that's the one I support. That's what the people have been presented. The one on the right would take modifications. I was very concerned about the numbers. And I think to have had all these forms for people and then all of a sudden at the last minute change where the Broad Street students are going, I think is rather unfair to them after all the time people have put into this. So I support the original map on the left.
Okay, and I think what Ms. Raymond said about biting too much off the apple is true at the moment. I think the changes on the right were meant to accommodate parents who had legitimate concerns at a few elementary schools, and I think we can nibble that later.
Sorry, Dante?
Yeah, no, I just want to say that, like, I feel like the more we modify and change things, just the more people are going to upset, and obviously that's not good. So I feel like we should just trust what the professionals have done in the numbers, and then just as Dr. Andrade said, like, handle individual circumstances on their own basis. Because this data is just for, well, I guess it's not necessarily just for now, but there's no way to tell what's going to happen in, like, the coming years. And if we do everything, spend so much time focusing on now, and then it might not matter in the coming years. So,
Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Dante. I really appreciate your comment. I actually wanted to thank Ms. Bishop for putting the effort to take into consideration the family's input and recognize that Mr. Smith had offered any of us the opportunity to call him or email him at any time. So it was completely not out of line for her to do so. And I think that it would be acceptable to vote on this tonight, making a hybrid mishmash of these two maps. We keep the new blue arrow line down, bumping out the new Searles line, and remove the top orange arrows down so that would agree with the administration's recommendation. And then we can always edit that we can play with it a little bit more. I do agree that we are doing this out of order. We should have done the elementary schools because we're going to end up Broad Street and Broad Street and Birch Hill. Those are going to get chopped up and probably end up split between the district, no matter which way you face it. I think we might end up with another little corner as well over in Sunset Heights or the new Searles Bicentennial area, but there's never a point when we're going to be able to please every single person. This is a rough scenario, and I think we need to take into consideration the feedback we've gotten. We need to recognize what the experts have said. Thank you, Dante. And do our best. And you know what? If 3 weeks from now we meet again, the administration comes back and says, you know what? We ran the numbers, and this one street, if we move this, it's going to fix all our problems magically. We can still edit that. It still works. And we do have the elementary school line vote coming up soon, so it's really important that we make this decision and get it underway, unless you want to combine them together.
I also want to point out, we have a board that consistently asks for public input. We want, to hear from the parents, we want to hear from teachers, we want to hear from the community. So what happened was this presentation, or this was done by the committee and then presented to the community, and then all of those people that we consistently ask for feedback from provided them. I listened to all of them, and I spoke with Mr. Smith and came up with the map that listen to the community, right? So what I'm now hearing from the board is they're not comfortable with the numbers. So we've met the community's need on the right side, because that's what they wanted changed from the original map. And now I'm hearing from the board, and we are kind of the last people to have a say in this, is they're not comfortable with the numbers. And here's how we make the numbers better, by moving one elementary school into McCarthy. So if we move the line up on the right side so that it looks like the top half of the left and then the bottom half of the right, we are literally taking everybody's opinions into account. And Mr. Smith is still available, as sick as he is of us, me calling him all the time. Call him with the feedback that you're getting from your people based on your working knowledge of the community and your feedback from teachers and staff who may not necessarily live in Nashua but work in Nashua, and do the work yourself. Because this is the map with no community input, just committee input. So if we're going to push this vote out, I would really hope that people are coming back to the board with their own ideas, reflecting their constituents' concerns, and have actual changes to make instead of just complaints. And I know that sounds harsh, but we can't keep kicking the can down the road because we're not happy with something. Do something that makes you happy. Figure it out. Present something, right? We can't keep holding off on these votes. Administration needs time to get the work done. Teachers and staff need to understand where they want to go. We still have a whole school that we have to staff, right? Like, there's a lot of work to be done. The board decision is the first of 1,000 things that need to happen. The longer we sit and think that we know the most out of everything, we're not letting administration do their job. Ms. Lampier.
I was just wondering what the rationale was for moving the line on the bottom, the green line, over to changing that. Is that based on the current school, elementary school lines, or is it based on elementary school lines that we've proposed?
So those were, like I said, I presented them at the same time. I presented the elementary school lines that reflected the parent and teacher's concerns, and then matched up the lines on the middle school. So this one doesn't reflect any family input on middle school or elementary.
No, that's not my question.
I know what, I'm getting to your answer. So what that line represents is the parents' feedback on the elementary schools, which then stops another school from being split. So yes, the line on the right is representative of a shift from
I'm asking which line.
I'm answering your question.
No, you are not.
That reflects bicentennial moving.
I'm going to ask you a yes or no question.
It is a yes question. I was explaining why it was yes. The bottom part represents the parents at bicentennial that don't want to be switched over to New Searles.
Are these lines, the people that put the input in, were they talking about the lines that already exist for the elementary schools, or were they basing their request on the lines that we are proposing to redistrict them to?
The middle school lines happened with an idea of what was going to happen with the elementary schools.
So which bottom reflects the current school lines best?
That one. The right one.
Okay.
The right one pushes the elementary school line back to where it was.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, but
Thank you.
I had said yes already. And it's hard to answer when people keep interrupting me. Sorry. So, does anybody else have any other questions, or do we actually feel like making a vote on something tonight?
I hate to do
Ms.
this.
Darling?
I have a question that I keep hearing from the audience. Is this taking into account the Mount Pleasant?
So Mount Pleasant lines within this school stay in the red zone.
Okay.
It's all there. You just had to look at it. It's been in front of us for months now. Just means you have to blow up your map a little. Okay, so what would we like to do? I'll make a motion to accept the board modified redistricting map with the line including Broad Street to go to McCarthy.
Wait, is that different than what?
That's the top part of the map with the bottom part of the map.
How many kids is this?
So the motion should read recommendation to accept the middle school boundary lines as presented in Group D, Scenario 2, with the adjustment at the bottom, with the adjustment to the New Searles Road, with the eastern boundary at the bottom, move from East Dunstable to New Searles.
No, the motion would be to approve the board modified redistricting map with the boundary line for Fairgrounds, including Broad Street Elementary School. So going up to the Broad Street Road instead of the river.
I have an idea. Why don't you make your motion just to accept that map, see if it passes? If it doesn't, then we'll eliminate that and start something different. Not different, but then you can combine it so we don't have to re-explain it again. I get what you're saying, Jen, just so you know.
I know.
That map is 620 or 608 is what's at.
So that's the 620 for Fairgrounds. This is the 12 students less on the left. It's 12 students.
So really, just to clarify, because I don't think the motion does what you said it does. I think the motion says we're accepting that map with the East Dunstable change, but it doesn't say anything about whether we're accepting the Broad Street part or not. So I would request that the motion be rephrased such that we're actually, because I think your intent is to accept the original map, but modify the eastern boundary between McCarthy and Fairgrounds as proposed on the second map. Is that right?
Well, it's potato. Do we want to lead with the top or the bottom?
I guess I want to.
However you want to say it, I want the top and the bottom. Make the motion how it works best. Because I've already said it and you guys aren't agreeing with me. So come up with what that motion's going to be.
Okay, I'll make the motion to accept the middle school boundary lines as presented in Group D, Scenario 2, with the modification of moving the eastern boundary from East Dunstable Road to New Searles Road.
But that's not right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Why don't you, let me just, the first map.
Yes.
If all you're doing is
moving.
changing the bottom right, then accept the first map with the change to the bottom right. Isn't that the answer, unless there's other changes?
Yeah, it's the same thing that I've been saying, it's just backwards.
Okay, so I move that we accept the original map with the modification as seen on the second map.
No. That's too broad.
On the bottom.
Oh my God.
The motion is to accept the original map with the following amendment to that map, and that is that the eastern boundary of the new middle school will be moved from, moved from East Dunstable to New Searles Road. Right? Yeah.
I'll second that. Any discussion?
How many students will that include?
That just switches, it's the same thing that we've been talking about, that switches the Broad Street kids.
No.
And then I think the Bicentennial kids, that neighborhood was like 20 students.
Heather said no.
No, it doesn't do anything. It keeps the numbers on the left. It keeps Pennachuck.
That's what we want.
Right.
Pennachuck at 702.
Yes.
It makes McCarthy slightly smaller by 20 kids. So it makes 620 for Fairgrounds, but 737-ish for McCarthy, and Pennachuck stays at 702.
Correct.
which in, 10 years, families might move around and who knows? But yeah.
Anyone want to call Preston? Run the numbers?
Dottie,
Okay, so that's been.
I actually have a question specifically for Dottie, just because she's lived in this vicinity for the longest time. You live in the North End near me. Do you think there will be, what do you think about the actual logistics of traveling from sending the kids from Broad Street down to McCarthy?
They go to Elm now.
Well, I heard from one parent at one of the events, they had problems because the comment was they're going to come back and go to North. And that is in the south part of the city. And they talked about if the kids were involved in sports, they would get familiar with the kids at the middle school that they were going to at McCarthy, but then when they came back to the high school at North, it would be a different group. It was students they wouldn't be familiar with. That was.
So it was less about the travel down to that end of the town, but splitting up schools, which is something we can't avoid since there's 3 middle schools and only 2 high schools, and the students that are currently living in this neighborhood go to Elm Street, so they're actually doing that anyway. Half of the kids go to South, half of the kids go to North, so it's actually already happening to those students. So if the biggest concern was the split when they get to high school, then that's good. I wasn't sure if that you had heard some feedback about traveling to the south end of the city. Okay.
No, it's just the different students that they would be, with. But what I feel badly for is the Broad Street parents are just hearing this tonight. This is a big decision. We haven't heard from them. They must be sitting at home thinking, what are they doing? We had no idea this was going to happen.
So I think that speaks to the fact that we as a board chose not to do this the other way, to put the elementary schools as a priority and then follow up with the middle schools. We did it backwards, but now here we are. And
But technically, nothing has changed from the map that they've had for weeks.
So nothing's actually changed from what they've had. But these maps have been online, and I actually have heard from several Broad Street parents specifically, and they had different concerns than what you were expressing. It was more about the travel out of the area, or the fact that they were the original map line was going to split one of the neighborhoods behind Broad Street, but not the entire thing, and split the school in half. Mm-hmm. So I think ultimately we can't avoid having kids split up for sports and music and drama and all those things when we have 3 middle schools and 1 high school. Some schools are going to have to do it. It's just going to be a fact of the matter. So I was just curious about that. Thank you.
Happy fact, having to gain and lose friends and change your groups and stuff like that, I am told by most of my teachers growing up, is good for you and teaches you to learn how to work with others. I don't think any of my bullies agreed. But
I have a question here, because the McCarthy Middle School is in the southwest quadrant. And if people don't realize where it is, it's all the way down Main Dunstable Road, southwest quadrant of the city. That was the last undeveloped area when I was on these boards. So in order for our students to get from Broad Street, this part of the city, to the southwest quadrant, they will have to travel on the highway and get off at exit 5 and go down Main Dunstable. Am I correct?
Yep.
That's a big travel for them. I hate to say that. That's a big travel for them. I'm just making my opinion, because you're going all the way to the southwest quadrant. You're going, and if you want to go down West Hollis Street and cut across through Westgate, you're going down towards the landfill, and you're going, or you could go up on Depot Road to that area. That is a loop around the city.
I always drive through Hollis because I don't feel like doing that.
So
Well,
that's
but
that's the crux of the
that's the
matter.
loop.
Are we more
That's the
concerned
loop.
with numbers, or are we more concerned with travel distance? That's, I
You know
think,
what,
I
I'm
think
concerned
the
with both
board-
of them.
I think the board modified map addressed the traveling situation.
I'm
and
glad
I think the
I'm glad
original-
you interrupt during my time, but you know what? That's okay. I'm concerned with both because you're asking fifth graders, fifth, sixth, and seventh graders to get on a bus and loop around half the city to go from exit 6 to exit 5 down Main Dunstable Road, which is only a 2-lane road. We haven't accommodated that road. So they're going to have to cut through Westgate or go down West Hollis Street, which is a nightmare now, okay? Then, so you've got fifth and sixth graders till seventh grade. Now the numbers aren't working because somehow, again, I'm going to go back to it, we never did this study to see what our population was. So now we're asking a group, and it can't be that you put the elementary school before this, because this has to be done even if we never even redistrict the elementary school. We could leave the elementary school the way it is for 2 more years. This has to be done because we've got to close down Elm Street because it was too much to repair, because what did we do? We piecemealed that school for so many years, and we never fixed anything. So we built a brand-new school to loop these young students around the city and put them there. And I get what Mr. Preston did, and I understand what the parents did, but somehow, because I only came into the elementary part of it, and I didn't say very much. I listened to everything, because as a board member, I don't think it was right for me to give my opinion. I need to listen, and I'll give you my opinion now. I have a T-shirt that says that. If you want my opinion, I'll give it to you. But the whole thing is here that we're asking young kids to loop around the city, and nobody looked at the numbers of where we were going with this population here. It's a sad thing. I don't want to see anybody lose their job. But we could have combined everything, and these students would never have been on a bus looping like this. So now we're in a situation, do we put 608 students at Fairgrounds, 702 at Pennachuck, and the new school, 737, was 620. So we're not really accomplishing what we were set out to accomplish, because it was supposed to be like 800, 800, 800, and I even said back then, you're never going to have the equality. You're never going to be able to balance it. But now we're not even balancing it. We're so low in one school, and then the other school, which McCarthy School, should be taking the brunt of the students, and we're not. And again, we're putting, what time do these students have to get on the bus to get to that school in the morning? That's going to have to be probably an early bus. And I feel, and if I was a parent on this looping, I would be, and I'm surprised parents aren't sitting here and saying, what's going on here? My son, my daughter's going to be getting on a bus, going on the highway to get off at an exit, and how long is it going to take to get there?
So
don't they already?
Just anecdotally, Ms. Johnson.
They don't do that already like that. This is a whole, you go on, you start at Broad Street here, exit 6, you get off at exit 5. You could take the right turn for west, or you can go down to Main Dunstable, and you go down that street and see what it's like.
I do, I drive that every day.
Okay. But when you put
I would say I
graders
will
and
fully
sixth
admit I
graders,
don't
you're
go
not
during
the
the
whole
school bus
sixth
drive.
grader.
Let's not do
But you
the
can
back and
interrupt,
forth.
that's okay.
So just anecdotally, Ms. Johnson, we live, as the crow flies, less than a mile from Elm Street, but as the car drives, it's 1.1 miles. My kid's on the bus for 45 minutes every morning. Most of the times he rides his bike there because he doesn't want to waste his time with kids that early in the morning. He's too cranky.
But your students
there's a
aren't
lot
going
of
on the
transportation
highway.
stuff that doesn't make any
There's
sense.
a lot of highway driving.
Ms. Giglio?
I'm getting a little confused, and this is kind of dragging on and on. So my question is there a motion that has been seconded on the table?
I seconded Ms. Raymond's motion, so yes, there is a motion
Could we
on the table.
repeat that motion? Because I'm not sure, since it doesn't reflect either of the two maps I'm looking at, that I can vote for it. I'm not sure exactly where the minor change is. And so just, I don't know. Anyway, maybe just take a vote and see what happens. And then
Well, just to clarify, because I'm literally sitting right here.
It's the right
The
map.
only change that's happening in Ms. Raymond's motion
Yep.
is this is going this way instead of over here.
Well, what about the purple part of that?
It's the purple
The
part
right
that's
map.
changing over here.
We're taking the purple part of the left mat.
And the
we're
bottom
taking
part of the right.
Okay, I wish we had a visual of it.
Should be overlaid. Do an overlay.
So, anyway.
Okay, I'm going to call the vote. If I don't have any disagreements, we don't have to go on a motion about that, but we're just going in circles now. So, Ms. Lampier, can you read the roll?
Ms. Darling?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
No.
Ms. Oden?
No.
I'm a yes. Ms. Johnson?
No.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilio?
No.
Okay. So that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's 6-3, and the motion passes. So
There were more than 3 no's, I believe.
I have no Ms. Oden, no Ms. Johnson, and no Ms. Gilio.
There was
And
another.
Ms. Brown.
Oh, I'm very sorry. Miss,
And you said no, Ms. Lampier, right?
I said yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, 5-4.
Can we expect a printout of this like tomorrow or something, that just shows an actual map that shows exactly the top and the bottom together, like, morphed together, so that we know what's going forward? It would be nice to see it and not look at these 2 maps anymore.
We'll try to work some magic.
Okay, if you can work magic, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Oden?
I would like to have the numbers, how it's affecting the numbers at the schools. Thank you.
If I could make a small request, I would love to hear what the admins at Pennachuck and Fairgrounds both think of this, with the proposed amendment and everything. I'm just curious.
Okay. So that is done now. Let's let's do board member comments, and then we'll go into our non-public, and we'll do. You need a second. I was about to get there. I was losing the words because I saw Ms. Gilio's hand, and I was trying to anticipate what her question was going to be.
Okay, yeah, I don't think you can anticipate this, but I consider this to be part of unfinished business, because a lot of our conversation tonight centered on the redistricting of the elementary schools. And I just want to say that even though I've been on the board 3.5 years, I'm not sure of how the procedure is. I came to tonight's meeting wanting to put forth a motion that we not vote on elementary school redistricting for up to a year from now. I was understood that I can't do that because it wasn't on the agenda. I will be putting it on the agenda for the next meeting, because I think that there's a whole lot of more work that needs to be done on the elementary schools. I can't support either of those 2 plans right now, and I'm not going to change in the next 4 weeks. So.
Ms. Raymond?
Tangentially, but not the same, I'd just like to request again that we get, either electronically or some other way, all of the feedback from that parents and community members have put on the website, because it was very difficult for me tonight to make a decision without all of, we didn't go to the forums because they weren't properly noticed board meetings, which was fine, but then we also didn't get the feedback yet, which makes it difficult for me to represent my constituents.
So,
Yep, that's good.
Okay. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. And I'm going to ask on the maps for the redistricting of the elementary, like overlay, so this is kind of over it, so we can see any changes, because this was impossible to follow tonight. Because we're going this map to that map, and then at the end, you couldn't see exactly where the change, I mean, I'm visual, but I'm not that good. When you got maps like this, I need to see kind of like an overlay where everything is being changed, and that's what I'm asking for. So any changes that we have, we can kind of get an overlay map, so we can question it and kind of see where the boundaries are from this one to that one. And I think we need all of this information. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now it's second public comment, and then we'll go into board member comments, and then we'll go into non-public. Ms. Darling, can you give me the second public comment sheet? Remember, everybody, keep your comments to 3 minutes. Yeah, I never put out my nice pens.
fancy pens.
So let's keep it to 3 minutes. These are for items not on the agenda. So up first is William Berry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I rise tonight to speak about the potential closure of Mount Pleasant. I believe my comments are germane because of what you just did with the middle schools, although it maybe should have been done together. I urge you to carefully consider the effects of the closure of Mount Pleasant will have upon the vulnerable community and students. It is not about the building, it is about the students. To that end, I urge you to consider 2 matters. First, how will a potential closure of the Mount Pleasant School affect the settlement agreement between the National School District and the United States of America Department of Justice as it relates to the responsibilities to our EL and ESL students? I believe that the closure of Mount Pleasant and the inequitable disbursement of its students will result in the National School District being out of compliance with that settlement agreement. My law partner, Helen Honoro, who is also my wife, is an education major. She's fluent in Spanish. She sat on the board of the State Board of Education for 14 years, and we've looked at the settlement agreement, and having knowledge of Mount Pleasant and don't know how, with the closure of that school, you will satisfy the settlement agreement. The National School District has mandated requirements regarding EL and ESL students. And that settlement agreement is very prescriptive on what the National School District must do to comply. It is my understanding that you don't even know where these students are going if you close Mount Pleasant. How can you get required services if you don't know the populations and where they're going? It is clear that the settlement agreement requires the administrators to have obligations to identify and service EL and ESL students, mandated educational services and opportunities that cannot be met in overcrowded, overburdened schools. I do not believe that the formulas you've used have taken into account the special services required of EL and ES students. The enforcement provisions in the settlement agreement allow for any one person to make a complaint. The enforcement agreements require you to provide data of how you are complying with this. And the enforcement agreements in this allow for the Department of Justice to go back to court to enforce your obligations. Think of the chaos that will occur if you close Mount Pleasant and the Department of Justice seeks and receives an injunction against that foreclosure. Think of the many chaos that's going on right now where the principal at Mount Pleasant has left and teachers there haven't been encouraged to move on. The second reason I think you should consider not closing this is financial. We're presuming that it would cost $21 million to change this school to bring it into compliance. At a current bond, a 30-year bond with the current municipal rates, that's $931,000 a year. Have you considered the loss of Title I funding or the effects on it? Have you considered losing the $1 million grant that Alderman Klee has gotten to improve the infrastructure around the school that the city will have to come up with?
Mr. Berry, just to let you know, that was 3 minutes. If you want to start wrapping up, sorry.
Yeah, I will wrap up. Have you included the cost of transportation, the cost of gentrification, the cost of maintaining a closed building, the cost of increased staff and infrastructure, Dr. Crisp, and the others? Someone said, do your best. Your best would be to know how your obligations may be affected under the settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. Your best would be to know what the true cost is when you factor in all the other costs that would be lost. What are the savings? And finally, what are the effects on the students with that minimal amount I presume it will be? Thank you.
Diane Merchant.
Diane Merchant, Bedford, New Hampshire, teacher, Mount Pleasant School. Upon learning in an email from Dr. Andrade about the transfer of our principal to Maine Dunstable, we requested a meeting with him. At this June 16th meeting, we discussed the topics of leadership, transitions, working together as we approach the July BOE meeting, where a vote to close Mount Pleasant hangs in the balance. Dr. Andrade acknowledged and agreed that educationally, the closing of Mount Pleasant is not in the best interest of Nashua's elementary students. He has suggested meeting again in July to talk further about the unique needs of schools like Mount Pleasant and the DOJ and the best practices moving forward. Research regarding school closures of marginalized communities states that marginalized students have, what did I do? Marginalized students have, oh my God, have a chance to prosper when their neighborhood schools close, only if they attend schools that are more affluent. As a member of the redistricting committee, I recommended a scenario that sent all Mount Pleasant students to Broad Street, which not only has empty classroom space, but also has the lowest population of all Nashua elementary schools. The numbers that you showed tonight didn't reflect what I knew on the redistricting committee. It would adequately accommodate both schools. The scenario was rejected by the committee with the argument that it would not meet the Title I threshold for financial support, leaving students' needs unmet, despite Dr. Andrade's assurances that there are other ways of securing money to bridge learning gaps. A colleague of mine, also on the redistricting committee, recommended sending all of our students to Charlotte Ave, moving the students in the northeast portion of Nashua to Birch Hill. This scenario was also rejected for the same reasons. Given that so many things aren't adding up, especially after witnessing the last hour, our marginalized communities really can't afford to have Mount Pleasant closed at this time. Keeping our school open while best practices regarding the closing of our school are researched. If you're trying to make class sizes equal, please do not overlook equity. The proposed scenarios for closing Mount Pleasant are not equitable. They're not. In less than 2 months, the committee had 4 one-hour meetings with a small group of participants to redistrict nearly 5,000 students into 11 schools. That is not enough time to adequately plan for student needs. It is hasty, if not reckless. Preston Smith, the redistricting consultant, unfairly omitted certain populations from his projected growth calculations, and he has yet to share his calculation formula, making it difficult to qualify his methodology. This creates concern that closing Mount Pleasant School is not an educationally sound option at this time. It's just not. This creates doubt that measures used are taking into account all student needs. By taking your time, you are giving the students of Nashua more time to flourish in their beloved neighborhood schools, and they all deserve that.
Deborah Well. Sorry, Deborah Well.
Deborah Wall, 23 Huey Street.
I'm not sure if you consider, but Mount Pleasant has some wonderful after-school activity opportunities like cross-country, Girls on the Run. And after-school activities require parent pickup or the ability to walk home afterwards. There are no buses for these after-school activities. If these students are pushed to a school where they are not within walking distance, then that limits what they can do after school. The school staff, wherever these students attend, the school staff, the PTO, and other families need to relate to them. They need to understand that some families' top priority is getting food on the table, paying the gas bill, figuring out childcare while working multiple jobs. Finding transportation to their child's school should not be yet another burden. They are being pushed into schools that charge for pizza nights, charge $15 for field trips, where other students bring in $20+ to spend at the book fair, have money to spend at the school store, get $10 or more from the tooth fairy. Family nights, celebrations of learnings, fairs need to be physically accessible as well as free. Some of these schools hold their chorus and band concerts at North, not in their neighborhood school. And that needs to be accessible, excuse me, to all of these students. I also want to say that talking tonight, spending $20,000 on new chairs for this room is kind of a slap in the face because we can't afford to keep Mount Pleasant open. I know the money comes from different places, but it's just, it's a slap in the face. Also, you have asked to hear all the financials and be presented at the next board meeting, which you are planning on voting. And that, to me, is not enough time. If you're not presented with all of the money that you can think about it, and you're going to vote on the same night, I mean, look how difficult it was to vote tonight on a map that I've seen for weeks, both of those maps. So it's not feasible. I also want to quote Dr. Andrade's email that he sent out on Friday, which said, "I'm writing to let you know the National Board of Education will be addressing a middle school redistricting plan at its upcoming meeting on Monday. An elementary redistricting plan is not on the agenda, but is expected to be addressed at the next board meeting in late July." That felt to me like you were trying to get us not to attend here, to not have members of the community come here and speak for Mount Pleasant. And it didn't feel good. Again, I think...
Ms. Wall, just to let you know, that was the timer.
Okay. I've said it before, I'll say it again. You need to be more sensitive with what you are saying. You sent that out to the entire district, and we're not going to be silenced. I've been here for 3 minutes for the past 3 meetings, a community meeting at Mount Pleasant. It's not enough time. I'm afraid that if I send you all my thoughts and emails, that I'm just a nuisance at this point, and you may not read everything and hear everything I have to say, which is why I'm piecemealing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam Marcoux.
Hello, Adam Marcoux, 4 Jalori Lane. I'm president of the Nashua Teachers Union, and as you all know, I have children here in the district, and I was a 1st grade teacher and a 5th grade teacher. So the theme of my comments tonight is research. Gateway to Opportunity is there. Tonight, Dr. Andrade celebrated the successes in the educational well-being at Mount Pleasant. How is closing that building in the best interest of those kids? I understand that it's not on the agenda, but we talk about the cost to renovate that building. I have 3 figures written down, 12 million, 20 million. There's a new one tonight, I think you said 21 million, Mr. Barry. So I'm not sure how much it really costs, so I know Mrs. Johnson's asked for it. I know we're working on it, but I agree. We watched tonight, we've had those maps for months, and we still had whatever that was tonight. One thing that stood out to me was a comment about why we were talking about moving the Broad Street lines in the north and the Bicentennial New Searles lines in the south, was because we heard from the community. So if we're going to focus on the however many people talked about moving those lines, which we don't know because that information is not public yet, do the 35+ people that signed the petition to keep the school open, the community from Mount Pleasant, did we not hear from them? Does that not impact? Because a board member who talked about community input has already said publicly they're going to vote to close the school. So input is good when it's convenient? I don't know. I'm asking the question. The research would not support destroying an educationally sound setting that these people provide. That I could go in and on about Title I and all that stuff, but that was covered. The CKLA stuff, the research. Well, if you haven't done the research, you'll know that Fountas and Pinnell and the Science of Reading people are like middle school fight in the middle about whose books are bigger than the others. So while we call the CKLA stuff a pilot, I would call it a soft rollout because we're not piloting anything else. And I'd like to know on the record at some point in writing what we're doing with all the LLI and guided reading millions of dollars that we spent. Because my understanding is it got pulled from your classrooms. Where is that going? Why are we not using it?
Mr. Marcoux, that was 3 minutes.
That was only 2 research. I have 1. Can I?
Just wrap, yeah, just
I'll go
be
quick.
on your way out.
On the part of research and the wellness policy came up, I noticed recess was removed from the policy in general, which is ironic because research supports recess at the elementary level. Have you seen the new proposed elementary schedules yet? You know there's 4 minutes of transition at the middle school and 5 at the high school, and there will be 0 at the elementary school as written. Now, we know flexibility, transition, what is written on paper is not always the same thing. But I'm wondering what happens to the federally or state mandated guidance curriculum in that new schedule to our SEL services. And I've been told recently that band and chorus will now be required to be outside of school hours. So let me look at this population.
It would be a good time.
So
3 minutes.
You know, public comment's convenient for you when you want to hear what you want to hear, but when it's not, and it questions everything that you're being told, as a parent and as an educator, the new schedule is a disservice to the students that it's supposed to assist.
September Frost.
Hi, can you hear me? September Frost, 10 Dart Street, Hooksett, New Hampshire. I'm a 5th grade teacher at Mount Pleasant Elementary. I just wanted to speak to the board changes Group A, Scenario 2, presented by Ms. Bishop. Several of my coworkers have asked for clarification on where our students are going. It looks like we are missing students, and we have not gotten clarification on where those missing numbers are going. Little concerning. Also, just a question. Broad Street, the numbers, we were just wondering, does it include the Title I preschool in the numbers in your changes over here? If it doesn't, could we move the Title I preschool students to Mount Pleasant? It would help us out with numbers, and we'd be putting them in a Title I school. Also, right now, Broad Street has 235 students it looks like. And in this change, there's 226 students. It looks like our Title I schools, the enrollment numbers are going up, and in some of these, our other schools that are not Title I, the numbers are going down, and I just don't see how that's equitable at all. So I'd like you guys to really do your research and look at the numbers and make sure you have the solid numbers so we know where all of our students are going. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you put that in the book? Okay. Board member comments, we'll start over with Ms. Gilio, or Ms. Brown on the other side, sorry.
Thank you again to Ms. Coffey for her years of service. That's excellent news. And I'm glad that we made some forward movement tonight. Nice job, team.
Thank you. Ms. Gilio?
I think I've said everything I need to say tonight, so good night.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I just want to clarify the chairs in this room. I asked for this a couple of years ago because it's not just us that use this room. Our students use this room too. And I've been fighting to get money where it needs to go. I fought for the Santa Life in the schools. So our students and our faculty and everybody, it would be healthier in the schools. I fought for this because these chairs are over 20 years old and they've seen better days. And sometimes we have to. You know, people might not like it, but I also try to get money where it needs to go also. I've been the one who's been questioning the $21 million for Mount Pleasant. I've been the one who's been saying I want to see the numbers. And I've been the one who's been saying, why are we piecemealing everything together? So if people are upset because I didn't think the chairs were going to come out to $20,000. I could probably try to negotiate something for less, but I trust Mr. Donovan. If we can do it for less, we will do it for less here. But some of these chairs just happen to be broken, and they've seen better days. Thank you. And everybody drive home safely, because I'm sure there's floods out there if you heard the rain on the roof.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Oden?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank all of you for coming. This was, I think it was a tough meeting. I feel badly for anybody that was looking tonight and understood that their student was not going to be going to the school they thought they were going. I think something like this takes time, and you want to have as much feedback and communication as possible, and a last-minute change, I think, is hard for people. I want to thank Dr. Andrade for going to the Mount Pleasant School again, talking to the people there. And I want to thank Ms. Bishop. What she did took a lot of time and a lot of effort. I might not have agreed with what was done, but I didn't take the time to do that, and she did, and I want to recognize her time for doing that. And to the Mount Pleasant people, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lampier?
I just wanted to say that I received an email from our New Hampshire State, our Nashua State Senator Cindy Rosenwald last week, saying that in the new budget for the next biennium, Nashua is going to be getting $8 million for the first year and $8 million for the second year. So that was pretty exciting. It's nice to see that our state is stepping in to give our kids more of what they need. And thank you all for coming tonight.
Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. I'd like to request that the board be apprised of some of these changes that we keep hearing about with the schedules. This is the first time I've heard anything about band and chorus not being in the elementary schools. This is the second time I've heard off the cuff about recess changing, and we haven't gotten any kind of a update or presentation or anything that would help us to understand what changes are happening and what the genesis of those changes are. I'm also hearing rumors about the DOJ making specific requirements for our district, and that might be helpful information to know too. Regarding public board member comments, I just wanted to mention that now that school is over, the summer lunch programs have started. We have a number of community partners who do a really good job of making sure our kids have food all summer when the schools are closed. And we work very closely with them. So Amherst Street, Arlington Community Center, the Centennial Pool, Dr. Crisp's, Fairgrounds, Elementary, I think, Head Start, WIC, Major Drive, the library, the Splash Pad, the Toll Street Mission, and the Soup Kitchen all had their lunch program starting today. So if anybody is in need of lunch, many of these also, not many, some of them also have breakfast. So, and you can find that information on the Southern New Hampshire Services website.
Ms. Darling?
I think this is one of the most frustrating meetings I've been at in my year and a half on the board. I usually walk out of these meetings feeling really confident and that at the very least I voted my conscience and that I made an educated decision. Tonight I feel like I need to go back to school because I knew nothing about the settlement agreement for EL students. It's a 19-page document. I pulled it up. I will be reading it as soon as I learn half the definitions. And I have an article that's now pulled up on learning more about the newest research on educational redlining because unfortunately I didn't even know redlining was a term in education until tonight. And I wish I could say that more time was the answer, but unfortunately, I think our board just proved in the last couple hours that even with several weeks and resources at their fingertips, only one member spent time with that consultant, and thank you, Jen, for doing that. I wish I could say it was me, it was not. I feel like I have a lot to go home and think about and learn about, and I want to thank the community for bringing these points up so that hopefully we all can educate ourselves a little bit better.
Thank you. I'm looking to, does anybody have any follow-up?
Neil.
Oh, he actually wasn't able to continue to stay on, so he exited at 8:42. So I'm looking for a motion to go into non-public to discuss student business.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We have to do roll call vote.
Okay, so we have a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A32C, and I need to take a roll call vote. So Ms. Darling?
Yes.
To close the door. Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Claffey? Is he still? Okay. Me, I am a no. I'm sorry, yes. Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Johnson was a yes.
Yes.
Ms. Giglio?
Yes.
And, okay.
Okay, motion passes. We are now in non-public at 8:54 p.m.